Phillies mailbag questions, and a lot of questions coming in. Unfortunately for the Phils, they are trailing currently 9-1 against the Blue Jays. It hasn't been the best debut there, Frank, for Mr. Zack Eflin.
Yeah, I really don't. I don't totally get why they brought him up to start. They went from saying, "Well, we're going to let him sit for a few days because he's gotten roughed up," to throwing him here into the fire, and they've given up 10 earned runs in 10 2/3 innings in 2 games before they said they were going to give him a rest. They ended up throwing him the next day and then bringing him to Toronto to get absolutely shelled. And it's a shame because you don't want to see somebody like him have his development sort of suffer because, they had to rush and grab somebody to fill a slot. I didn't think they were going to do that, but they did that. And the results weren't very good.
So who would you have rather seen get the call?
Probably Brett Oberholzer. If you don't want to go David Buchanan, you go Brett Oberholzer. Not that Buchanan's a better name, but at least if Buchanan gives you the start, you're really not that worried about the future. And it's Zack Eflin, who's supposed to be one of the pieces for the future. This isn't necessarily the best introduction to the major leagues.
Talking with Frank Klose here on 97.3 ESPN. And second day in a row, Franco is out of the lineup here. And obviously he came up a little lame the other night, rounding the base there, and it looked like a little bit of a knee problem there. So should we be a little concerned about Franco moving forward? Is this a little precautionary?
Yeah, Franco, he was in a rundown, and they're calling it a mild sprain of his knee. He wasn't injured to the point where he couldn't hit that home run, because he did later in the game against Jonathan Papelbon hit a home run, if you remember. So it wasn't enough to take him out of the game, but I think at this point, being that this year is all about the future, they're just going to let him rest up and make sure that he's healthy, because I think you don't want to lose somebody like him when the games don't necessarily mean as much right now. But yeah, he went through a little bit of a rough period, and he seemed to have gotten himself back on track in June. And they call it the sophomore slump, where the pitchers make the adjustments to you, and then you got to figure out how to adjust right back. And it seemed like he was on the right track before he had that little minor injury. But he's doing pretty well in June. He has as many home runs in June as he had of all of May, and in May he got a 230. So I think he's getting himself back together and back on task.
Yeah, and he's coming up on like one full year. I think he's played like 156 games in total between last year and this year for him. And the numbers they're pretty good. I mean, he's hitting 259, 25 homers, 88 RBI, 33 doubles. He struck out 110 times in 156 games this year. So give us your assessment of Franco over about one full year.
I think he's looking good. Again, it's just a matter of making the adjustments. He got off to that really nice start. He did sort of tail off a little bit last year before he got injured, but I think what we're seeing in the month of June is what we need to see out of Franco. It's that initial adjustment period that he has to make back, and the numbers suggest he's making it. Again, batting .278 so far in June, 3 home runs. After a month of May where he hit .230 and only hit 3 home runs in all of May. So he seems like he's bouncing back. And I don't think it's necessarily a coincidence that the Phillies' struggles, have come kind of when he quieted down a little bit. But yeah, I think in terms of his development, we're starting to see what you kind of want to see out of somebody like him. I think people were reaching a little bit when they said, "Oh, he's going to hit 30 home runs this year and he's going to drive in 100 runs." I think it's easy to put the cart ahead of the horse, but in terms of natural progression, it seems like he's getting where you want somebody like that to be. I mean, he's probably not going to be a superstar. We know some superstars like the Mike Trouts of the world have just come in and just taken off, but this is probably good development for a very solid player.
Frank Klose is with us. The Phillies mailbag is open. And, Frank, since we talked to you last week, the Phillies have had their draft. Mickey Moniak, the top overall pick. And Tim wants to know, how long until the Phillies see the prospect, Mickey Moniak? Do you think it was the right pick?
Yeah, so the thing about high school players, and I know a couple people have sort of expressed their concern with taking high school players. We know that the high school player is going to take longer to make it to the major leagues. Certainly, we all love immediate gratification. So I think we're looking a good 4 years. And if you look in some of the big name players that the Phillies have taken in the past in the first couple rounds that have had that came out of high school, Cole Hamels, they drafted him in 2002, and it took till 2006 till he made his major league debut. And that was kind of a quick turnaround for a pitcher. Jimmy Rollins, for example, he was a high school player drafted in 1996. And it was at the end of 2000 and really 2001 when he actually became a starting player. So you're going on about 5 years or so there with Rollins. It's not unreasonable to think that they're going to have the same kind of turnaround there. And looking at J.P. Crawford and perhaps the most recent big-name high school student that the Phillies drafted, he was drafted in 2013. He doesn't look very ready right now in 2016, so we're probably looking at next year to see J.P. Crawford. So that's probably standard turnaround time. Now, granted, there have been players in history like Ken Griffey Jr. who come up in 19 and can play, but you would expect him to have to go through the normal development and go from level to level, and I think that's what it's going to take for him to come back. Now one of the reasons why that's not an area necessarily of concern for Phillies fans is that they have a pretty stocked minor league system and plenty of players ahead of him, so that may have contributed to their decision to take a few high school students, which might have some really strong upside because they have some other guys ahead of them that they want to see develop first before they could get to the next round of talent.
One of the names that was mentioned, Frank, was A.J. Puck, and I'm curious to find out your reaction about taking a high school player versus a college player.
Well, it was nice when they could grab Aaron Nola because he was drafted in June of 2014, and by July of 2015, he was already up in the major league pitching. I think in that draft, the Phillies were desperate for any type of major league talent that they could get to work right away. In terms of Puck, Puck seemed to put it this way: Puck was on a 50-win Florida team that is going to the championship right now. So they're making the College World Series. Very, very good team, and somehow he only won 2 games. Now, I know sometimes the won and lost stat for pitchers is overrated, but you would think that somebody with the raw talent that he has could hang in there and win more than 2 games, especially when your team wins 50. And so I think he was thought of very highly when the season began. And I think just enough concern creeped in among teams that he really felt so far. Let's face it, you would have thought that he would have been taken by the Phillies first or the Reds second, and he dropped way down to, below the top 5 even, which was a real shock to some people. But when people saw him pitch this year, I think they were at times less than impressed. And if you really go all out and put all your eggs in the A.J. Puck basket, and he's Philippe Amont. I remember Philippe Amont with a top first-round pick. Big, tall guy that threw really hard. Well, sometimes they become Philippe Amont, who just retired, by the way, and sometimes they become Clayton Kershaw. So I think that they felt it was safer to go the Mickey Moniak route.
As you mentioned in the mailbag, Jimmy Rollins, Cole Hamels, J.P. Crawford, all guys drafted out of high school. So we'll see if Moniak ends up working out for the Phillies. And Michael wants to know, how about some of the players at Reading? Or there's some guys making some news down at Reading. Dylan Cousins, 19 homers. Here's a guy that we've heard a little bit about during the mailbag sessions. But are there some guys at Reading offensively that we should keep an eye on?
Yeah, the Phillies have some pretty strong offensive players in Reading right now that are, and Reading has the best record in the league by far in the minor leagues. And so if you look at some of the league leaders in the offensive categories, you have Dylan Cousins with 19 home runs, and Rhys Hoskins is number 2 with 16 home runs. So you can imagine what the two of them are doing in one Double-A lineup together against Eastern League pitching. And then on top of that, they have Jorge Alfaro, the catcher, who's second in the Eastern League in batting average. And then on top of that, Cousins leads the league with a 952 OPS. So you've got a lot of offense at that Double-A Reading team. But I think that it's important that the Phillies let them continue to develop, though. It's not going to be a quick fix. I know sometimes players have successfully made the transition from Double-A to the majors. But I think if you look back to just last year, you had Brock Stassi win the Eastern League MVP, and then when he got to AAA this year, he struggled a little bit. Andrew Knapp, he was off the charts last year, and to start off AAA, he struggled a little bit. Now, both of them are sort of getting their feet under them at AAA. Andrew Knapp, he's got a nice 10-game hitting streak down there, bringing his average up to 267, which sounds middle of the road, but when you considered he was sitting in the 230s for a while, and Brock Stassi's now up to 265. So just because you do well at AA doesn't necessarily mean it's going to translate to immediate success in the major leagues. And I think just looking at those couple players this year that were way over the top stars in AA last season, it's kind of a reminder that you need to sort of let them move up. Now, I would not be shocked if we see a promotion for either of those players we mentioned, Hoskins or Cousins, this year. There will be room. What's going to happen is we're going to see a lot of the players from this draft start to get assigned. Now, the Gulf Coast League Phillies, which is the lowest level that they have, and then the second lowest, the Williamsport Crosscutters, they don't begin until the draft is complete and they start to assign players. So in the interim, they've had a lot of players hanging out in extended spring training in Florida, and some of them are going to start to move up into perhaps some of them don't even go to Williamsport. Maybe they decide they're ready for Lakewood, and that bumps some people into Clearwater, which bumps them into AA at Reading, and then next thing you know, there's a carry-on effect to AAA, and that's when we might just start to see some of these players move up a little bit, because if you're looking at the really strong numbers that the Cousins and Hoskins are putting up at AA, you might, if you kind of conclude that there's nothing else that they can learn by facing AA pitching, well then it's probably time to move them up. But Jorge Alfaro is a little bit of a different situation, because you want both him and Andrew Knapp to start every day and catch every day, and you can't do that if they're at the same level. So we'll see what happens there. They might be able, towards the end of the season, kind of keep them both at AAA, letting one serve as a designated hitter just to sort of keep them fresh. So I would wait and see what happens to this talent as it moves into AAA, and then kind of go from there. But to think about the Phillies' immediate offensive woes, I think that's not the right solution at this time.
All right, Frank Klose has more over at 973ESPN.com. We have the mailbag up on the website on Mondays, and the answers for you right here every Tuesday at this time on the Sports Bash 97.3 ESPN. You can read more from Frank at sportstalkphilly.com, part of Philadelphia.com, where they have all their Phillies stuff. And, of course, follow Frank on Twitter at Frank Klose 973. That's Close with a K, 973. And send them your question for next week's Phillies Mailbag. All right, enjoy the rest of this one here, Frank.
Thanks so much.